All right. Well, welcome,
Brian, you completely
dude.
disappeared. And now you're frozen. And now you're gone. Well, I guess we'll just wing it here and say welcome everybody to Chinwag Nation.
My mom called me, and it stopped my live on my side. So I don't know what you said, Steven, but I think you
Well,
introduced.
I just said welcome to Chinwag Nation. I was about to do the housekeeping.
Oh,
And
well,
then
why don't you do
no,
the
you
housekeeping? Just
you you need practice with that. So let's
I do. I've missed it the last couple of times, but yeah, it's like apparently I haven't socialized this enough that we go live every Sunday from 6:45 to 7:30. Um, but my mom was giving me a call. But thanks for picking it up, Steven. So this is episode number 13. You know what else I keep doing? I keep I keep using the last episode number for this episode. So,
isn't
so
this
this
is
is
this
this
is
is
13?
episode 13. Yeah, this is
Oh
episode
yeah, because
13
I think
for
we
us.
posted that it was 12, right?
Yeah, I did. But the last one was 12, and I think it was the last one I started it off with episode 11, so I had to change that too. So, yeah, episode 13. Um we are talking about learning together and failing together. And we're really excited about this subject because I think as leaders, we both really care about this idea and this concept. We are talking about things that are our own opinion. They don't reflect past, current, or future organizations. It's just us having a good chin wag, talking about things in the leadership space. And we believe that in building lasting leadership communities, we believe in doing the hard stuff together, and we believe in keeping things simple and relatable, and something that no matter your role or no matter who you are, and whether you're a leader in your family, a leader in your church, a leader in your work, a leader in a group of friends, wherever it may show up, we want to make sure that we're sharing things that are relevant to you and make sense to you, and foster and build community. And so again, we're talking about learning together and failing together, and we're really excited to dig into it. So, Steven, I'm handing it back over to you, man.
Did you mention that this doesn't reflect on our past, current?
Yeah,
Oh,
I threw that out there.
I just
Yeah,
wasn't
I threw
listening.
that. Yeah,
Which
it was just so smooth,
yeah.
just
Well,
so
I
smooth.
was I was honestly I wasn't listening to retain. I was listening to respond because I was going to make a joke that your mom was calling me. And
She just texted me just now, and I think if I would have pressed on the text, it would have frozen me again, and you would have been all on your own.
you know,
So
we'll survive.
we'll survive.
Yeah, man. So we're talking about failing together and learning together, right? And I know that you and I were kind of bantering back and forth about this a little bit, and
Yeah,
I was thinking on, what specifically do I want to talk about? Because there's a lot of things that you can talk about when it comes to this topic. And a question that kept popping into my mind was like, what if the moments that we try the hardest to hide, so like your mistakes, your slip ups, you know, your missed opportunities, right, are actually the key to our best leadership? And I know that I wrote a couple of follow up questions to sort of solidify that. Like, if a team never fails, are they really pushing boundaries? If a leader never admits mistakes, how can trust be developed, right? If we don't share what went wrong, how do we make sure it goes right next time? And so, I'm just kind of curious about, Brian, your general thoughts on that, because I know that we haven't been able to dialogue back and forth on it yet.
yeah. I when as I was preparing for this, and I was thinking about the questions that you kind of sent ahead of time. A few things popped in my mind. Uh, the key word of together, right? So, um, the idea being that if we make mistakes, if we fail at something, if we slip up or mess up, we're doing it together. And I think a lot of times, uh, anybody, regardless of role or title, um, probably wants, to your point, probably wants to keep these things kind of in their own bubble, or maybe within with their people that are not, maybe not even part of the team. And so I think it's almost more natural to keep it to ourselves because it's safer than it is to do it together. And I almost like, I've been on teams before. I've led teams where, depending on the my team members' past experiences, um, this may take 6 months to build up to, right? So I could show up all day long and say like, hey, I want us to learn, I want us to be open around discussion, but they may have had a past boss who may have set boundaries that created boundaries to push boundaries,
Yeah.
right? Like, that probably sounded really confusing, but they essentially, how they showed up made it nearly impossible to push boundaries and learn together and grow together. And so um, I actually wrote a question to your question, and is this idea, like, in general, just like wishful thinking? Is it really truly possible to have a space where people fail together and learn together in the same, you know, forum and format? I I'm leaning towards, um yeah, it's really hard because it truly takes uh an entire group of leaders within the same space to subscribe to this idea. um like, if you're on a team, Stephen, as a leader, and four of you subscribe to this idea but one doesn't, right? It's not gonna stick. It's gonna be really hard to stick, especially if the one person who doesn't buy in is above everybody else,
Yeah.
right? They don't necessarily model that. And so I guess for us to dig into, it's like, what is it? What have we done, right, in this space to make it possible to do this? And I have some ideas in terms of what I've done with the teams I've led. And then maybe there's an easy way to start, right, in this, in kind of achieving this. The first framework that came to mind for me was agile, right? In kind of an agile space where it is truly iterative, and it's about, you know, looking back on the past body of work and trying to get a little bit better in the next body of work. But that model completely kicks out the idea of a boss, right? It's like self-organizing, self-producing teams. They have guidance, right? But you're not it's not hierarchical in terms of decision making. you know it's truly held at the how they navigate, right, how they make mistakes and navigate through the body of work that they're supposed to focus on, right? And so um yeah, i I think it's really hard to do that, right?
I honestly, I'm probably going to challenge that a little bit.
Okay,
Uh,
I think that's the whole point.
yeah, yeah, for
The
sure.
whole
Because
point of it.
I think you're right. If you're working in a place that doesn't have competition, um, because you said quite a few things. So I'll start from last in, first out here. So like with an agile, like if you're doing an agile project, right?
Yeah.
Your your scrums, like your daily huddles, should have the appropriate level of sponsorship there to overcome barriers in the moment. So between the
Ex-
next,
yeah,
so like
exactly.
the hierarchy needs to exist enough that you can like push stuff through, right? Um, but then like going back to, is it possible to be in a place where you can fail together and learn together? I think you have to now if you want to remain competitive. I think you try to hire the best people to be able to do a particular job. Sometimes that can be their aptitude versus their experience. Sometimes it's their experience versus their aptitude. But nowadays, at least in any role that I've been taking on, like I don't anticipate being in the same role that I signed up for a year, 8 months, 6 months, maybe even less down the line. Like things have to change in order to adapt with the demands and the changes of technology in the world. So with that, right, like there, if I'm not learning and I'm not making mistakes, because I personally feel like my experience is all of my learned lessons from all of the mistakes that I've made, right? Like I have to be out there experimenting and making mistakes if if I want to grow in my role. And if I'm not growing in my role, I'm getting I'm gonna get out competed. My company is gonna get
No,
out competed.
I get that, but the title of our episode is Together, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's where I get a little bit stuck. Um, where uh, I think for a lot of people, it's safer to not talk about your mistakes in your team setting or with your boss. And to your point, it depends on the organization that you work in, right? Or the place that you're leading in. Um, and so I think that's where it becomes a little bit difficult, right? A little bit challenging.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think people don't want to admit their failures in front of their teams?
I well, I think it depends on where they're at. Especially if they're brand new, I think it's especially challenging because you want to put your best foot forward, right? You want to show that you can do the job. You want um, to your point, know where you measure up. And so if you immediately put yourself out there in kind of a challenging space, I think you can almost feel like you're not measuring up right away. Um, I think for more experienced team members and just people in general, I think it's just how the brain works, right? It's we don't we're drawn to go to places that are safe just by our nature, right? We want to be safe, we want to be secure, we want to be supported, and like sharing where you failed, sharing where you've struggled. Um, I don't think that's safe, right? I just and I'm not talking about myself per se, but I'm just talking about in general, like just the nature of our minds and how we work. I think think it could be unsafe for folks, and that's why. I think it's just how our brains work.
Yeah.
I really do. And it takes a I think it truly takes like a almost a strategic, right, goal. And talking about general workplace here, right? Maybe even a church, maybe even a faith-based place, maybe even uh a strategic intent for your family. I don't even know if that makes sense, but I think that it takes that level of power and resources to truly make it happen.
Yeah. Oh, for
Because
sure.
I hear it talked about a lot, right? I hear the idea of, hey, let's fail forward, right? Or let's make mistakes and learn from them. But the mechanisms and the structures aren't in place to reinforce that, right? It's just something that's said because it's the right thing to say, right? It is the right thing to say. Like we should be able to grow and learn in our roles, whether we're a leader of people, a leader of an effort. We should be able to have the space to grow and learn. Um, I just think that it's hard to make that a thing unless it's like the highest level of an organization is saying this is how we're going to operate. Every time we do something, we're going to intentionally carve out space, whether it's a meeting or a project or a program or a kickoff or whatever. Every time we're going to carve out space, and I'm going to be as the leader, the biggest leader. I'm going to be the first one to talk about where I messed up and where I could have done better. So modeled at the highest levels, but also resourced. Um, and uh, I don't know if I've seen in an organization, and I don't know if you have, Stephen, either, or maybe anybody on this live. I don't know if I've ever seen a strategic goal that says fail together, learn together.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for, and again, we try to leave certain employers anonymous as to not
Yeah.
reflect opinions and things like that. But
Yeah.
um, one that's very open around fail fast, learn fast, right? And um, to your point, it does take a high enough level of sponsorship in the same way it does when you're saying, "Hey, communicate upwards and sort of own your work," as we talked about in um, previous chinwags, right? Because if you come in and you give your boss some honest feedback and they come off defensive, are you going to come back to them and give them more feedback in the future? No. Um, because I want to touch on something you said, Brian. You know, the way that we're wired, right? Um, and I want to be kind of respectful of this and honest about this. We're not born wired that way, right? Like I've got two young kids, I can hear them screaming out here, who make make mistakes all the time, and they don't feel bad about it at all. The only time they feel bad about it is if we, the parents, get on them and
Yeah.
provide them shame, right, for
Mm-hmm.
making those mistakes. And why I want to bring that up is like this takes serious reconditioning, especially in a leadership space, because a lot of it boils down to insecurities and, frankly, a more reactive versus logical space, as we've been wired to be afraid to fail. So I think it's just, and like you mentioned, right, the psychological safety has to be there to be able to fail. The sponsorship has to be there to be able to fail. Um, but I think we as leaders, regardless of our level, have the ability or the calling or the chance to show up and model that behavior regardless. And I would say that if you're working in an organization that isn't promoting your growth or your experiential learning, right? Like that's a culture that you may need to assess of whether or not that's the right fit for you.
Sure. I mean, and I think there's a function of this that's choice. So um, people might show up. Oh, so
Oh, Mal.
You got a Mr. Ross. I'm gonna start calling you Mr. Ross.
Oh goodness, Mal back from Central Washington University days. Haven't talked to him in a long time, but it's good to see him post on here.
Yeah,
Welcome.
welcome, Mel. Um, no, I think it's a choice too, right? So an organization could check every box, right? I got your sponsorship, you got resource, you got the strategic goal, but then the person themselves, to your point, has to or President Ross has to step into it, right? And I remember a time where I was learning about I don't know, it was about 8-9 years ago. I was learning about really just my leadership comfort and strength in this idea of um, stepping into uh, confidently stepping into conversations where I may have created space where I may have created a scenario where um, trust needed to be repaired. And for me, the more I practiced it, the more comfortable I felt doing it. And to this day, I could walk into a room with a leader that I work for or that I work with and just say, "Hey, I feel like there's an opportunity for trust repair here, and I'd love to talk through it." Um, and But that didn't just happen overnight. And I think that's the same with this idea, right? Like this is something you practice. I've heard this word several times in the last couple of weeks. There needs to be a framework, right? Some kind of framework to practice these things through. It just can't be a statement of let's learn together and let's fail together, right? There actually has to be some steps that I walk through, and then my people walk through, and then so on, to kind of make sense of how to actually go about doing it and practicing it. It's like why your band teacher got mad at you for not practicing 30 minutes a day in between band practice at home, because he knew, or she knew, that if you did that, you'd actually like be able to play your instrument um in a really good way. And I think that's kind of like what this is about, practicing so you can play this instrument of failing together and learning together really, really well.
And I think like stepping into a philosophical space, right? Like leadership, regardless of if you're managing somebody, if you're a leader, it means that you have some type of influential connection to somebody or a group of people, right?
Sure.
And so that in and of itself puts you in a position to sponsor culture, even if it's in a small silo. And looking at things like if we go back to traditional racy, when a lot of the work that we talked about with the cultural led model and how organizations are structured and how you can empower those who report directly to you by allowing them to be responsible for more things, right? Um, Anytime that somebody is responsible for something and I am their leader, I ultimately am accountable for that thing. And if you don't have the self confidence or the comfort to fail in your own experience, you're definitely not going to have the confidence to fail for somebody else's experience. And so, when somebody, what I mean by that is if somebody's responsible for something and you've empowered them to run with that and they make a mistake and you know that they're in a learning position, do you reprimand them for making that mistake, or do you take responsibility and accountability for the mistake that they made and then coach them through it? Right.
I think
And
that, yeah,
what?
I think that depends on the person. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but like some people, if you were to step in as a leader, might take that the wrong way, right? Especially if they want the space to learn through it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it just depends on what agreement you've made with the person, right? Who's working through whatever they're going to work through, in terms of how you're going to navigate that together, right? I think there has to be some agreement up front, like, hey, if I do this thing and I learn through it, I want coaching, or I want consultation, or I want partnership, right? And I think making that agreement ahead of time sets it up to be successful, right? No matter the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to put on there that it's Mal and not Mel, Brian.
Oh,
Come
oops.
on.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Speaking of
Thank you.
speaking of failing together.
Dale, yeah. Uh,
But
how often does that happen? I'm so sorry. So
um,
sorry, Mal.
um, yeah, man. I don't, I have to think through that stuff because I mean, you've worked for me before. I don't know if I really ever set up like formal agreements with my team, but I would definitely put them in a level of empowerment and try and mitigate the risk in the sense that if something significant were to happen
Sure.
because of a learning experience, right?
Yeah, I'm tracking.
Yeah.
I'm
And
tracking.
I take the fault for that. I own that. Hey,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm the one running this division. I'm the one running this team. That's on me. And now all of a sudden they've got a much safer space to make mistakes because their boss has their back.
Yeah. You're the heat shield, right? No,
Yeah,
I'm tracking on that. I guess in my mind I'm thinking of ideal world, right? An
yeah,
ideal world is one in which you're talking to, right, the level above you, and you're saying, hey, this is how I like to operate my teams. Um, this is how I like to show up. I'm going to give this person and this person the opportunity to lead this space. We've agreed to kind of learn through it together and coach through it together. And to your point, ultimately, I'm accountable no matter where these things land. But I'm also want to give these people the growth opportunity, right, to learn together, and or fail together and learn together.
I think this is just for folks in general, that your boss's response to that is going to be very telling.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, right. Command and control, or uh, right, flexible and supportive.
Yeah.
Uh, no, I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean,
yeah,
there's, I feel like we could do a whole series on micromanagement, right? But if,
yeah, I'm sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a very key point, right, with this, and that's failing together, learning together is very freeing. It's very oxygen producing, right? It's very much can be motivational, and I think the opposite can be suffocating, right? It can snuff out the fire. It can um, cause all kinds of issues with the success of the organization, retaining people, and those types of things. And so, I think we can, you and I can confidently support the idea that um, this is good for an organization. I think
yeah,
this is good for any leader to subscribe to. But I want to honor that for the leader trying it. Um, it can be a little bit scary if they've never experienced it themselves, right? In terms of
yeah,
knowing how to do it. Uh, and maybe you work with a team that doesn't like to be public about their stuff. They're just not. They
yeah.
just don't want to talk about when they make mistakes. They want to keep it quiet and work maybe one on one with you. And so I've when I've tried to do this with teams that I've led, it's taken a while, right? You have to build up to this. It can't just be a light switch moment. I think you can say it, but the framework, the way that you go about it, it's you got to take the time to do it. You have to level people up slowly. And I think we both kind of hit home the idea that you have to model it first, right? You have to be the one stepping out first and talking about your mistakes and how you're going through them and giving your team face back time to give you feedback, right? And so we got Alyssa talking about servant leadership versus command and control. Absolutely. Mal said, and I got it right this time. Otherwise, every person comes to the environment with their own understanding based off of previous employers or previous work experience. Absolutely, Mal. You'll find me saying often, I'm sure Stephen gets exhausted by this, but every time a new person joins your team, the culture resets, right? So, uh, say you're failing together and learning together, and then a new person joins and they've never experienced this before. It's probably going to be culture shock for them. They're probably going to be like, "What the heck is going on? What did I just walk into?" And it actually might scare them to the point that they may have thought that they've joined the wrong team, right? Because it's that much of a leap for them mentally. So there's a lot to consider, right, in this space when you're trying to do these types of things with people, and figuring out the best way to meet them where they're at.
And I think that directly correlates to your hiring and onboarding processes as well, right?
Yeah,
I
sure.
find that as I've gotten more experienced in my profession, I care a lot more about cultural fit um, than I do about checking the experience boxes, right? If they,
Hmm.
if somebody's got the aptitude and the competency and they're a good fit with the culture and they're going to be empowered here, I know I'm going to get so much more out of that individual than somebody who comes in thinking that they've got it all figured out and they're a culture of one. Um, and
Sure.
I learned that through my own experience, right? Because there's been multiple times in my career where I've had individuals take a risk on me where I didn't necessarily have all the requirements or the box checked. But man, was I passionate about that role, and I was really passionate about the opportunity. And I knew, like from day one, that the people that hired me took a risk because I'm sure that there was some very competitive individuals that were probably better experienced than I was. But because I knew that my employer and my boss believed in me and my ability to do the job,
Mhm.
like I wanted to hit the ground running from day one so they get that return on investment, you know? and it creates trust and loyalty right off the bat. Um, and so, be thinking about that as well. If this is something that you want to start establishing, even in small steps, like if you have a weekly team meeting or a weekly one-on-one with your boss, you could even ask your boss, like, hey, what's something you learned this week, right? Like through a hiccup or a mistake, like what didn't go perfect, but it was a really good learning experience. Curious to see what they say, right? But as this becomes more habitual and it becomes a part of your culture, right, you're going to have to think about this: does this align with your employer's sort of like strategic cultural pillars? And as you're hiring, are you finding people that are a good fit? Because it may not be the right fit for everybody. To your point, Brian, not everybody wants to be in a role where they may be exposed like that. And that's okay too, But this in particular, this leadership community that we're talking about, I think there's a certain level of influence that leaders have over people to where, there's sort of an inherited risk at this point that we're all aware of kind of being put out there, put on the spot, visible. But it doesn't mean that it has to be right for you.
Yeah, and I think there's a certain function of this that the higher you go up, you may not have a choice, right, to be put on the
Yeah.
spot. To your point earlier, right, the higher you go up, the more accountability you have, and the definition of leadership in the space is it can shift and adjust. We only have about 14 minutes left before we wrap up, but I do have a question for you because I found this very interesting quote as I was doing research for our time together, and it was a 2024 Gallup. Gallup is a really well-known, well-renowned organizational surveying company, and they do quite a bit of studies on different demographics. They splice, they dice, they really try to get into like what's happening in the workplace today. And this is from 2024, and they say they surveyed employees across a variety of organizations, and they said the percentage of employees who strongly agree that their organization cares about them overall and their well-being has gone from 49% in 2020 to 21% in 2024. And the reason why that stood out to me is I almost park this idea of failing together and learning together in the bucket of caring. Right? It's a way to show your organization that you care about it, but I also think it's a way to show your people that you care about them. That it's okay and it's safe to create an environment where you can make a mistake. And guess what? Not only am I going to not have your back, and not only am I going to not create pathways for you to learn from it, I'm going to take the heat if I put you in a position where you have to step out. Like in my mind, like that's almost on the level of like what a parent would do for their child, right? That level of care and concern and protection and want to create comfort, right, for them when they're learning and growing and maybe taking their first leap into something. Um, and so I think this idea of creating an environment where people can fail together and learn together may be becoming less and less common. And so, and that's a big leap, right? We're data guys. I know there's no correlation there. I'm making up correlation on the spot. But Gallup's, they're pretty close, plus or minus, right? In the range of like it's not trending upward.
Yeah.
Um, but this is a way, I think, for you to have an impact on that data point as a leader. This is a way for you and I to have a data point in an impact on that data point in our organizations that we engage with, whether it's in a volunteer capacity or church or home or whatever, to care about people enough where it's okay to make a mistake and it's okay to learn from it.
Um, Brian, you said you had a question.
Yeah. So
That sounded like a statement.
my question is do you think that failing together and learning together is is a function of caring.
Oh, absolutely. I think being able to see the value in someone when they make mistakes is treating somebody with the basic decency of being a human being, right? Like I myself have had to deal with the challenges of being a perfectionist and the unrealistic expectations that I put on myself, and being able to admit that I'm not perfect, right? Um, Despite what my mom says, but it's one of those things like I make mistakes all the time. I mess up all the time. I have lots of moments I'm not proud of that I've learned from. Um, and what human being doesn't experience that very same thing, right? I'd be curious. You're talking about correlation. Knowing the difference between correlation and causation. There's a lot that's happened between 2020 and now. Um, there's been a pandemic. People have been more removed from the physical workplace where there's intentional sort of team bonding and connections and relationships that get developed when you're in a physical space. But I will say this, like 49% as a benchmark wasn't necessarily a really great jumping off point for us to begin with,
Yeah.
right? It makes me wonder, like how do people, and this could actually be a great question to survey folks, and it could be generational, but like how do people feel cared for? So when they say I'm not feeling cared for, what is it that they're missing? Because I remember talking to my grandpa back when he was alive, and he said my job thanks me every single time they write me a paycheck. That's how I know that they care about me, right? And then nowadays, I mean, that's really different. I
It is
I have
different.
different expectations than that.
Hmm.
I can tell you, like, as a very servant leader, human centric leader, I try really hard to do small things that just show that people are noticed. And like one thing I did is I went on Amazon and I bought, I think it was like 100 little shout out cards, and it's got no more space than like a post-it note to write on. But every Thursday, I've got it in my calendar. I set aside 15 minutes to just write shout outs for 3 to 5 people that have
Yeah,
made
it's
an
awesome.
impact on me during the week, right? And it's handwritten, and I just like leave that on their keyboard before they get to work. And I'm always amazed like how appreciative people are to receive 2 or 3 handwritten sentences about being noticed for even the little things, right?
Do you notice when they make a mistake and learn from it?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And but I'm also very lucky to be in an environment where we intentionally talk about our failures. It's part of our agenda.
Hmm.
uh,
I think
and
that's a great call out. Um, if you're looking for, sorry to interrupt you, Stephen, but if you're looking for uh, a very simple way to take what we're talking about tonight and put it into action, and you can almost title, you can even title your agenda item this: failing together, learning together. Put it on your standard agenda for any meeting,
yeah,
right? Your one-to-one, your team meeting, and define it for yourself. Define it for what it looks like in your team and in your individual relationship with that person. What would great look like in that space? I think that's a very tangible, very simple way to apply this. No matter your form of leadership, let's fail together. Let's learn together. Let's talk about it every time we connect, or every other time we connect if it becomes a little bit too much.
yeah.
So I sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
Oh,
you there, but I thought that was a great call out, a great takeaway to take a step forward right in this space.
yeah. I mean, we talk a lot about how to show up as a professional, and we frequently go back to this like really deep spot on making sure that you're building a healthy foundation for yourself as a person before you even show up for a job, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, as somebody who has had my own experiences with cruelty and human beings, right? It took me a long time to realize that I was worthy of what was just basic human appreciation, like how you would treat anybody, right? And I thought that that was a very cherished thing, and a rare thing. And as I've grown and as I've become more confident in myself as a human being, right, that completely shattered my philosophy on things like having to be perfect, having to not make mistakes, hiding, the visible hiccups that may have occurred as I've been learning in a new role, right? And so, be thinking about that too as we talk about developing this community of leaders, right? Be kind to yourself and think about, if you're afraid to fail, where did that really come from? And chances are, I mean, it might be enforced through a bad culture at work, but chances are it happened way before that.
Sure.
And you gotta learn to be kind to yourself, love yourself, to be able to make mistakes in a more professional place.
I love that, Stephen. I quite a bit of engagement in chat. I've been trying to kind of acknowledge folk, but there's folks as they add stuff in there. Alyssa, uh, Elliot shared. I think what makes people feel cared for is individual. So there has to be an element of curiosity and also follow through, not just asking, but letting them know they were heard. Uh, and I think that's a great call out, Alyssa. The two-way right aspect of this idea, and it's something we talked about when we were first on. It's not as simple as saying let's fail together and learn together. I think it has to also be modeled through uh, not only a team orientation, but also a leadership team orientation. And we talked about that unique individual right design, uh, right, so you can meet each person where they're at versus just kind of a blanket approach right to this idea. my, I
Your
love it.
son's
My
on here.
my 14-year-old son is on here too. Hey Axel, what's going on?
Got to start him young.
Yeah, exactly. He's been wanting me to set up a YouTube for him so he can game and have people watch him game.
I have a
So
feeling that was just an excuse so he could troll me on here.
yeah, probably he's probably ready to troll you 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
But
I will get.
um,
I want to throw it out there before you get into this transition that
yeah,
we do have quite a bit of engagement today. So, folks, there is a bit of a delay in chat, but please do feel free to ask us some questions right now. And Brian, I
yeah,
kind of have an idea. I
yeah.
was
Let's
thinking
do it.
like we should do like a tool of the month,
Yeah,
because I
love
keep
it.
thinking about an activity that you taught me. Actually, it was the fill your bucket activity.
Mm,
Super simple, right? But it asks some very specific strategic questions as to how do people like to be recognized, and essentially how do you feel cared for at work,
hmm
right? And I will tell you right now, as leaders, like there's a call to accountability when you do those types of exercises, because if you have people take the time to fill that out, even if it's 5 minutes, and you collect that feedback and you don't do anything with it, you're also developing culture by that action.
Yeah,
But
100%.
you don't have to make assumptions. There's very simple activities out there where you can learn about how your employees feel cared for.
Yeah, I think it was like a one pager, and it was
It
literally
is.
a picture of a bucket.
Yeah.
Um, so I remember that. I'm gonna have to go dig that up. Maybe we can cover that in one of our times together. But yeah, as Stephen shared, if you think we should get into like a tool of the month, we'd love to hear your feedback. Let us know. You can direct message us or pop it in chat. But then also, if you have any questions, just to wrap up, or if we've talked about anything that you want us to dig into for a few more minutes, we'd love your questions in the chat. Really appreciate the engagement and the comments, and whether they were aligned or validating or maybe even more curious. We love the engagement, so please keep it up. Um, But if you have any questions, we'll hang out for a minute and talk about the fill your bucket thing for a little bit longer. But yeah, there were a set of questions in there. Um, how do you like to be recognized? Publicly, privately, or not at all? If you were to be recognized, what would you like that recognition to come in the form of? Is it a handwritten note? Is it a more time together? Like, is it a gift card? Because there was a time where we used to be able to give out gift cards, right, as a form of recognition in one of my past roles. And then anything else you want us to know? I think it was like 3 or 4 simple questions, you know. And there's a my mentor back in the day, Billy Wright. I don't remember. I think you know if you
I
remember
know
Billy.
Billy.
Billy was mentoring me early on in my career, and she said something similar to what you just said. She said, if you're going to ask for feedback in any forum, right, whether it's your people or customers or anything, she's like, you better plan on doing something with it. And she's like, and she was saying this in reference to this idea of like too many open-ended questions leads to a lot of information that you have to do something with, right? So have open-ended questions, but also like know that you have a plan to do something with them, right? As you think about them and analyze them. So,
Yeah,
but it's very true. Otherwise, it's just an empty act, right? Similarly, it can come across as an empty act to just say, "Hey, let's fail together and learn together," and don't actually provide a way to actually go about doing that.
for sure.
So, putting it on your agenda is a great way to do that. Just add it to your agenda. What do we learn? Where do we fail? What do we learn from it? It could be that simple. So, don't see a lot of questions in chat, Steven. So you can message us on the side. We've had people do that as well. We would love to know if there's something particular you want us to dig into. We're happy to base our time around your thoughts and feedback. So just let us know if there's something you want to dig into, a tool or an idea or a concept. We're happy to pull that in as well. Thanks for the conversation tonight, Stephen. Always appreciate your time. And have a great evening, everybody. Thank you. Happy Sunday.